So I have the honor of introducing Liz Waddell. And thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Heather. So like Heather said, this talk, I really wanted to bring some attention to what happens when you need to engage an external IR team. Just a little bit about me, if I can get the slides going. There we go. So I am an incident commander at Talos Incident Response. That means I work with customers on the worst days of their lives. From the time the bat signal is raised until we go back into the bat cave. I've been doing this for a long time. I have worked with a lot of customers. I have seen a lot of incident response plans. And really what I want to talk about is just what that process is like from start to finish, so you know what to expect. For those of us who are on the front lines doing this, so maybe there's some questions you hadn't thought about, some ways that you could do that better. I am located in Dripping Springs, Texas. It's not quite Austin, about 30 minutes out, a fun place to visit if you ever get to leave your house again. Also, I am a crazy cat owner. I'm putting that out there because she is likely to Zoom bomb this, so just be prepared, maybe something to look for. So, all right, so we're gonna break this down into 3 sections. First, we'll be engaging in an IR firm. So when do you need to bring an IR firm in? When do you have to work with that team? How do you choose one? Where do you go from there? The second, which I think is really important and something that I want to make sure everybody does well, is scoping that engagement, figuring out what your objectives are, how somebody else can help you. And the third is deploying the engagement. So what it's actually like once we're on the ground, what we're doing, how we go from start to finish. So engaging an IR firm. So when do you call one? And, I would hope to see in every incident response plan, 1, I would hope that you have an incident response plan. 2, I would hope that in there it says, hey, this is a point when we need to think about asking for help. But like I said, I have seen a lot of incident response plans and this is rarely in there. So, some things to think about, if you're going to be going up for litigation, if there's a possibility of that, you probably want to engage an external IR firm. Analysts get tired. Sometimes they reach walls. That's also a good time. We do have, a running joke within kind of, IR consultants about ER Friday, because it seems to be that at 4:45 on every Friday, that's when most ERs go off. And, that could just be our thinking. I've done some statistical analysis of it. It's not totally correct, but the one theory we have behind that is a lot of people spend all week working through problems and finally get to the point where they realize it's out of their hands. So really, I want to make sure that you think about this ahead of time. So maybe you can get some boots on the ground, some help in there before, things are getting a little bit out of control. Other things too, sometimes, the people above you, I think this happens a lot in InfoSec world. It's a sad thing to say. Sometimes they don't listen to their security engineers, their analysts, when they say there's something going on, something that they need help with, recommendations to make things better or to talk about why something happened. And sometimes having, experts come in and give you that, verifying what your findings were, giving you those recommendations. Sometimes they'll listen to that a little better than they can to you. And another time too is sometimes, you just need help. Don't be afraid to ask for that second opinion, to get that expertise in there. Okay, so you've decided that you want to have an external IR team. So who do you choose? There are a lot of options out there for you. So some things you may want to think about, obviously, reputation. There are a number of ways you can think about that. That can be just going to the Googles, but also talking to your colleagues, talking to people in your ISACs. Who have they worked with? Who have they liked? Get their references. Obviously, you can look at what the marketplace is saying. So you can go to Gartner, you can go to Forrester, you can go to IDC, see what the opinions of those those experts are. What I would say about leveraging those type of marketplace analysts is look at some of the things that they're thinking about what makes an IR firm good. And not necessarily what's in their report, but what are the key things they're looking about? You know, we want to think about, do they have the expertise? Do they have technology? What is their past history? What kind of threats can they see? What kind of threat intelligence do they have? Those are all important things. Previous partnerships is also something to think about. If you have an environment where there is a lot of tech, tech deployed, that, your EDR solution comes from one vendor, your firewalls they come from one vendor, it may work to, you already have those partnerships built, talk to your account teams, leverage them. And obviously, I think one of the big things that most companies are going to think about, the bottom line, is how much does this cost? So while you're shopping, and hopefully you're not shopping the day of, look and see what that total cost is. Are there going to be technology fees for deploying this? Is travel included? How long is this for? What is the cost per hour? Those type of things. So think about those things when you're shopping around. Okay. So one-time engagement versus a retainer. Most IR firms are going to offer a retainer. You obviously have the options of one-time engagements. The pros of that, generally, there's no commitment. You're thinking about a one-time purchase. This may work well for someone who has limited funding, but you do lose some of the value that you get out of a retainer. So with a retainer, generally, you're going to have SLAs that are in place. So if you have to call in help, how long it's going to take for them to respond. You can really get expectations set forth. So understanding what your terms and conditions are, what type of technology they're going to bring in. Your lawyers can look at your contracts and determine what needs to be put in place. You can also talk about cyber insurance, and we'll go into depth into legal and cyber insurance in a minute. Another important thing in there is really giving that opportunity to build relationships, really getting to understand people, to get to understand your environment. You get to understand the people you are working with, and understanding what's going to happen when they come in. And of course, most retainers do have service packages now. So if you're not leveraging a company for actual emergency response services, then you can also leverage them for proactive services, things like helping building out your incident response plans, doing tabletop exercises, compromise assessments, threat hunts, those type of things. So scoping the engagement. This is one of the key things that, in order for you to be happy with an IR team, has to be done at the start of everything. No matter who you're working with, this is so important. So the first thing that's going to happen when you pick up that phone and you call and you engage with an IR team, we're going to want to know what happened, right? So be prepared to answer some questions, really have this information around. And we're going to start with the basic overall. First, how did you discover the incident? Was this, did the FBI call you? Did a help desk, throw this up? Did somebody get a phishing email? What happened? Also, what have you done so far? This is really important as we're trying to figure out what an adversary did, what you did, really making sure that you document all the actions that you've taken. And third, also, we want to know impact. We want to know what's happening to your business. We want to know what's happening to your technology. Did you have to shut off your entire network? Is this all over Twitter? Those are the type of things that we are going to want to know, that 30,000-foot view right when we first start talking to you. Okay, next, we're going to want you to explain your capabilities. So we're going to want to know about people, process, and technology. So do you have a CCERT on hand? Do you have people who have done analysis? What does your network team look like? Do you have sysadmins? Is your legal team on the call? Do you have a disaster recovery plan? Processes, do you have an IRP? Are you following it? Are you engaging a crisis management team? And then, of course, technology. So backup technology, obviously, in the case of pre-ransomware deployment or ransomware deployment, this is something we're going to want to think about. We want to know what's about your network detection capabilities, your logging, your endpoints, and we'll delve a little deeper into that in a minute. Okay, so determining your objectives. So I would say this is something that a lot of companies don't really think about before they call an IR firm to come in. And the reason this is important is, if they say we want to know what happened, we may not know what we're going to be looking at, what logs we're pulling, where we're going at it. So if you just said, hey, I want to know about root cause, we can get to the point where we can tell you, you don't have enough data to determine root cause and we're done. But really, if you had said, hey, I'm concerned there's data theft, I'm concerned there's lateral movement, or I just want to get recovered and get back to speed, this is all going to change how we approach this. So I think it's important to have those conversations before you pick up the phone and to really think about that while you're having discussions. Okay, so determining access. So when you bring somebody into your company, you need to be able to get them to look at things. In, you know, pandemic world, most things are going to be done remote. So how do you get an incident responder access into your environment? If they need to get VPN access, what does that process look like? If it's going to take a lot of change management and things to go through, have plans in place for that. If you're going to need to give somebody credentials to access systems, what does that look like? Or access to your technology stack. I want to get somebody into my SIEM, into looking at my logs. What do those things look like? I will say, for us, that back and forth, a lot of times, we will share places for things to be uploaded, but if we get direct tool access, a lot of times that's faster. I would say something that, one of our annoyances that I've seen in the past would be somebody going, well, can't you just look over my shoulder while I'm scrolling through those logs? That is a terrible way for people to do investigation. I mean, if you're an analyst, would you like to be looking at over somebody's shoulder surfing to get answers? We want to get direct tool access. So in some cases, we could actually go to a place. So if we are allowed to leave our houses and travel to an employee, to an engagement site, we're going to want to know what facility we need to go to. So this is a really interesting question because most companies, the larger companies, are going to have multiple data centers. They're going to have multiple places. The IT people, the InfoSec people may not be where all the data is kept. So are you having people going in to actually collect data, or are you going in to help lead response efforts? So determining where the best place to have bodies is going to be is important. But also, do we need to get security badges? Are there escort concerns? And then do you have to run a background check or do security clearance to get somebody access to your data? So I think this is something that retainers are helpful for because you can think about this beforehand, get background checks run, get security clearance, because that's going to take some time and it will take time out of your analysis. Some legal consideration. So again, not a lawyer, this is not legal advice, but I have talked to a lot of lawyers. So one of the things that should be key on your mind is, am I going to be thinking about preserving privilege? This is something you need to talk to your counsel about. It's generally recommended that, especially if you're bringing in counsel or an external IR firm, this is something that's engaged. But we need to think about what this means, especially in light of some recent court cases. So if privilege is invoked, does that privilege stand if you share your report with somebody? How do these things get affected? But there's also just some basic things in there. Do I need to mark everything as attorney-client privilege? Is it a work product? And then something else to think about too is, if your legal team isn't that familiar with cybersecurity investigations, you may want to consider engaging external counsel, somebody who has experience with this. Cyber insurance. So the question that I sometimes really hate asking this question to the beginning of engagement and getting the answer, I don't know. It seems absurd that, a CISO or somebody in security would not know if they have cyber insurance, but frankly, it's not that unusual because sometimes they are not the ones who are actually, buying the insurance. They're not the ones who are working through the broker. So if you are not that familiar with what your cyber insurance policy is, get to know it, read it, and have this discussion before you have your incident. And there's a couple of reasons why, actually more than a couple. Some cyber insurance companies will have panels that have preferred vendors. They will have pre-negotiated rates, but you can also get approval for non-preferred vendors. This is something though that is best to be negotiated before you have an actual incident. Other things that you need to be aware of is, when do you give notice? Insurance companies don't want to pay you. That's pretty much their goal. So make sure you understand what are the things that would inhibit you getting that payout. So some things may say you need to let us know within 24 hours of an incident occurring. Well, find out what exactly that means. Also find out what data needs to be captured. So in order to recover loss, find out what your policy covers. So it could be data loss, could be destruction. They can cover the cost of your firm. They can cover extortion costs, which I don't really want to go into so much, but they can't. Some companies will cover things for ransomware and DDoS. Also, if you had a PCI incident, they can handle things like credit monitoring. They can cover the cost of your lawyers. And they can also cover public relations. So if you have to communicate your incident to the public, this is something to consider. Are you going to be working with an external PR firm who has the experience in working with things like this, or a crisis management firm? So understand those things beforehand. All right, so we talked about things. We've scoped the engagement. We're coming onto the ground. We're there. We're ready to go. So the first question, we get asked is, how long is this going to take? I think people who work in InfoSec understand this better than people who are in C-suite positions or other positions in the company, because we understand that, analysis takes time. We're not just going to look at, generally, we're not just going to look at one log and know everything that happened. So the answer is, of course, it depends. We're going to talk through some things that can make this faster, but really one thing to make sure that you and your team know and that you communicate to everybody is, in general, this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. We've gotten through the first part. We've detected it. We want to go into containment. Well, to go into containment, we have to know what happened. So prepare your stakeholders that this can take time. But what's going to be helpful for them is really having communication of what's going on, what's happening, so they don't feel like they're in the dark, but they understand that, we're not going to have an answer in a couple of hours. This is not CSI cyber. That is not how things work. And one other thing, to make sure that I think we want to communicate with your stakeholders is, you want to get business recovery as fast as possible, but when you move fast, you can make mistakes. You can tip off adversaries, you can delete evidence, and then we can miss what actually happened, and then you're going to be having to do this all over again. All right, so prepping for our arrival, and now it's generally virtual. And even before pandemic, I would say most IR firms are operating remotely. That's just the way of the land right now. So one, preserve your evidence. It's really, really heartbreaking to have machines re-imaged before we get there. It seems like a sad thing, an obvious thing, but again, people are wanting to get the business up and running. So if you care what happened, don't just get rid of all your evidence. If it's possible to segment your systems, that is one way to help. You can isolate that without actually destroying the evidence. We may also ask you to begin initial data collection. This is really, especially if we were going on site, there are some things to help prep as we're getting tools up and running. We may ask you to run triage scripts, start pulling logs, start really figuring out what you need. So just getting those things on hand and getting ready, because data transfer can take time. It's not immediate. Okay. So, our main goal is we're here for your evidence. We cannot figure out what happened if you don't have evidence. So the more data that's there, the better chance you have of getting answers going to make everybody happy. And there's some few ways that we can do this. So every IR team is going to be different, but there's some things that are going to be, pretty similar. So we can do collection through tool deployment. That could be, deploying some custom technology, based on that vendor's approach. We're probably going to want to get access to your SIM and your technology stack. We may be doing actual forensic image collection. So think about, do you have somebody who has the capability of doing that? Since everybody is working remote, how do you handle getting copies of disks now? Well, how do you do that? Same thing for script deployment. Do you have some ability to push data through your environment? Do you have a ways to collect files and log collection? And we'll dive into what type of logs we're looking for. So tool deployment, again, like I said, this can be varied by vendor, but any successful deployment is going to rely on preparation. So if we're deploying an agent that's for endpoints, do you know how many endpoints do you have? Can you identify which are the critical ones, the key ones that you want to get first? Do you know your network? Do you know where your ingress and your egress points are? What are your emergency change management requirements? Do you have this in place so we can actually push things out quickly and not have to wait to get a COB approval or something like that? Are there system requirements? Are there network requirements? And again, that question about pushing agents and software through there. So logs. Even if we're deploying technology throughout the environment, logs are critical to understanding what happened. And really one of the things also that's going to save you a lot of time and money is making sure they're synchronized and making sure they're all synchronized in UTC. Why you be logging your stuff in local time, I don't know. Please log everything in UTC. The other thing to think about is, where are your logs stored? Are they being stored locally? Are they in the cloud? If they're in the cloud, how do you access them? Do you have to go into an agreement? Do you have to go to AWS? What do those things look like? And really crucially is, what is your data retention policy? If I know an adversary was in the environment 7 days before and your logs rolled over, within 24 hours, I can't tell you what happened. So we need to really know what that data retention looks like and what's going to be a dead end where we can find things. So the network, knowing your current capabilities and your visibility gaps are really going to be helpful making this work. So do you have a network asset list, and do you have network diagrams? Sadly, I would say most people do not have accurate network diagrams. So maybe you should get some. Also, do you have packet capture capabilities? Are you taking NetFlow? What kind of network logs are you keeping? So we want to see NetFlow, we want to see DNS logs, we want to see DHCP, firewall, network device logs, IDS. Obviously, there's a long list of this, but what's going to be really critical too is knowing what you can't see. If you can't see that, then you're not going to be able to get an answer out of that. So think about, can you see east to west traffic? Can you see what's going from system to system? If we're looking for lateral movement and we have that capability within network, it's going to make things a lot faster than having to dig in system to system. So speaking of those systems, do you know what your servers and workstations are? Do you know if they're Windows? Do you know if they're Linux? Do you know if you have Windows XP in your environment? What are those type of things that are in there? If you have antivirus and EDR solutions, do you know what the coverage is? Do you know where things could have been missed? Do you know what remote access applications are used in the environment? So if I know that somebody is accessing TeamViewer in order to remote in and steal things, is TeamViewer something that we should expect to see in your environment? Being able to answer those types of questions will make things so much easier on the end. So logs for endpoints, and for Windows or for Linux, we want to know what happened on a system. I understand that keeping event logs for Windows boxes can take up a lot of space, but if you don't do that, it's going to be much harder for us to determine what happened. Michael yesterday, I think, had some really great cheat sheets and malware archaeology on his website, so I would encourage you to go look at that. Really thinking about, we want to know who logged into a system. We want to know what changes are authorized. We need to be able to talk to somebody who can have those answers. So I I'm just doing this as a kind of example of the way that analysts are thinking. And I know most of you, this is your process too. We're thinking about, what happens with an evidence collection for an email TED. So we want to figure out what initial access is. We're looking for spear phishing. We're going to want to look at the email gateway and console logs. Credential access, we're going to want to look at the security logs. PowerShell, are you logging your CLI, your command line interface? Most, I cannot really name how many engagements have not been living off the land within this past year. I mean, I wish I had the exact percentage number, but almost everything. There's going to be PS Exec, WMI, RDP, PowerShell. So are you taking those things into account into your logging? So containment and eradication, which is I know where everybody wants to get to containment, we can't contain until we figured out what happens. One of the things too I want to make sure is most of us as IR teams, we are not going to go do hands on keyboard and re-image your systems. So that conversation needs to be had at the beginning of your scoping call and talking about how we're going to move through recovery. And most IR firms do have partners we can work with or that you can work with, but understanding that somebody is going to have to be out there rebuilding systems and it's likely not going to be us, that conversation needs to be had. That being said, there are some things that we're going to recommend you do, and they are going to be critical for your success to get out of here. So have you thought about doing a password reset? And can you do that enterprise-wide? Can you do that locally? Do you have LDAPs? Do you know where your service accounts are? Do you know how to reset the golden ticket twice? What if your domain was compromised? And unfortunately, we see a lot of domain compromises. So somebody has access to your domain controller, you're probably going to want to rebuild that. So have you had plans in place for that? Can you create isolated networks? So when you're thinking about as we're moving from containment into recovery, we've decided what's going on, you're rebuilding systems. Do we have a place where we can put, a dirty system, one that, is clean and keep them out of the already infected network? Is that something you can do ahead of time? Vulnerability patch management. We had an incident where we saw, an ASP.NET vulnerability being leveraged, and the customer is like, well, we don't have that vulnerability in there. And then within the next day, we saw it being hit again. It was like, clearly there needs to be something thinking about your vulnerability management process. Where are you looking at? How can you determine, am I vulnerable to this exploit that's going on? And then also just some basic things, blocking out the perimeter. Like, how hard is it for you to make firewall changes? Have you thought about this? Is this something you can do quickly? And then containment is not just about containing the actual adversary, the environment. It is also containing what's happening with the incident and communication level. So do you have NDAs in place for the people within your company? Are they talking on Facebook about, hey, we just got hacked, and this information then is spreading everywhere? So how do you contain the communication that's happening amongst your teams? All right, so again, reiterating, we want to get to recovery, but this cannot happen until containment and eradication is done. So really understanding what happened and really making sure that the ways that things got in can be mitigated. So if you're dealing with things like ransomware, really, do you have backups? Are they secure? How far back can you go? So if we say, hey, we saw this adversary in here, 30 days ago, even if you had ransomware that only got deployed a day ago, they've still been in your environment for a long time. So can we back it up to there? So work with your crisis management teams also for their business continuity and disaster recovery plans. A lot of times they have done business impact analysis, so where are going to be your keys to start first. So if you can go to them and say, hey, where are critical applications, where are critical servers, then as you're moving through recovery, you can start a plan for that. Also, you're going to want to get some plans in place for monitoring and getting long-term improvements. So are we done yet? Those incident activities. So there's some things to think about, as we're leaving. If we came in and we deployed agents or software or technology, and it's not something that you're keeping, do you have a process to take it off? Also, is there a need for evidence retention? Are we putting things on legal hold? Do you know how long your firm is going to be keeping that evidence for? Having those discussions are going to be pretty important. Then the report. So reports should guide you through the incident. A good report should help you figure out how to make this not happen again. So we're going to have some recommendations. Sometimes we'll just do those verbally if we don't want to have, we're concerned about privilege or other things, but you do want to have those conversations about this happened. How do we stop this from happening again? But if your report is underprivileged, again, based on things we've seen recently, consider who you're sharing that report with, seeing if that is something that will nullify privilege. So have those conversations with your legal team. And last point on there is, are you sharing what you saw with the security community? And we talk about this all the time, right? We see things, people get embarrassed, we don't talk about it. So one of the ways that you can do this is to work with your IR firm. They're probably doing blog posts, they're doing case studies. They can take your name out of it, but still get, what happened out there to the community so other people can be aware of it. So now we are actually done. Thank you everybody for attending. If you want to follow me on the Twitter, I'm at VLSIN. Obviously, Talos Security is at Talos Security. Go listen to our Beers with Talos podcast. It's a lot of fun. We've got great white papers and stuff on talosintelligence.com. So thank you, everybody. And I think we've got a few minutes, Heather.
We do, and I pinned a few questions. There was, hang on, I want to pick kind of the best of the best, but there are many pinned for you. Let's see. Do any of the various compliances prevent or create serious obstacles in engaging external IR forensic investigations?
I actually have not come across that, and I'm not going to speak out of turn. I will say, most regulations are going to require that you have an investigation, and a lot of them are going to require reports. So I have seen more that require somebody to come in, and whether it be your internal team or an external team, do the investigation and then report on that within a certain amount of time, especially where GDPR is concerned. There are time limits on when those reports have to go out.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Here's another one. Would it make sense to have an external IR firm included in the process of reviewing and establishing a new cyber liability insurance policy?
If they are your current, subject matter expert who you are engaged with, I think it's important. I'm not saying they should be the ones who decide what you buy, but really understanding what their place within that would be, and whether or not it's something that they can help you with. Again, you have those thoughts of the pre-negotiated rates, and really determining just what they need to capture and seeing if both partners are something that could work with that.
Perfect. And the final one, and I think it would probably be better if you just answer it by typing to people or sending links, but several people were asking about suggestions on how to start building an IR playbook and any recommendations. And a lot of people were posting links that I pinned for you. So you may just want to look and see if you agree or have anything else.
Oh, absolutely.
Clearly something that people are concerned about.
Will do.
And this was a fantastic talk. Thank you so much, Liz.
Thanks, Heather.